The survey ship dropped out of hyperspace with a soft hum. Navigator Kethvala checked her instruments and made a small note in the ship's log. Another yellow star. Another system to catalog. She had done this work for 30 years, and most systems were empty or boring. She expected nothing different today. The ship was called Whisper of Certainty. It belonged to the Galactic Collective, a group of over 800 different alien species who had joined together thousands of years ago. They shared knowledge, trade, and peace. Part of their mission was to find new worlds and new life. Kethvala was proud of this work, even when it was dull. She was a Morith, a species with thin bodies covered in shiny scales that changed color with their mood. Right now, her scales were a calm blue. She moved her forearms across the control panels and began the standard scan of the system. 8 planets, 1 asteroid belt, nothing special. She was about to move on when something made her stop. Radio waves, coming from the 3rd planet. Kethvala sat up straighter. This was unusual. Radio waves meant technology. Technology meant intelligent life. She had found pre-spaceflight civilizations before, but only twice in her entire career. Her scales shifted to an excited green. She pointed the ship's sensors at the 3rd planet and began recording. She expected to find simple signals, maybe basic mathematics, maybe early attempts at communication. Young civilizations usually started small and slow. The data began flowing in. Kethvala watched it fill her screens. Then she frowned. Then she leaned closer. Then her scales turned a color she had never seen them turn before. A kind of pale white that meant confusion and fear mixed together. The signals were not simple. They were not small. They were a flood. Thousands of different frequencies, millions of individual broadcasts, voices speaking in languages the computer could not count, images, music, something the database called television. The ship's translation system tried to make sense of it all and failed. It crashed. She restarted it. It crashed again. On the 3rd try, it finally stabilized, but it was working harder than she had ever seen. Kethvala pulled up the planet's file. The 3rd world was a blue and green sphere with large oceans and varied terrain. The beings living there called it many names, but the most common one translated simply as Earth. They called themselves humans. She checked the timeline of their radio transmissions. The earliest ones were approximately 130 of the planet's years old, and that was nothing. That was the blink of an eye in galactic terms. Most species took thousands of years to develop from first radio to basic space travel. But these humans, in just over a century, they had done everything. Kethvala scrolled through the data with growing disbelief. They had split something called the atom. They had walked on their own moon. They had built machines that could think. They had mapped the code inside their own bodies. They had created weapons that could destroy their entire world. And they had done all of this while fighting wars, constant wars, against each other. They had never stopped fighting, not for a single generation, and yet they had also never stopped building, creating, dreaming. Her scales were now a mix of colors she could not name. She did not know what emotion they represented because she had never felt it before. She opened a file marked Cultural Output and was hit with another wave of data. Art, literature, music, philosophy, stories. The humans had created more stories in their short history than some species had created in 10,000 years. They had imagined travel between stars before they could travel between their own cities. They had dreamed of meeting alien life and had written millions of tales about it. In these stories, the aliens were sometimes friends, sometimes enemies, sometimes gods. The humans had considered every possibility. One file caught her attention. It was a piece of music created by a human called Beethoven. The database noted that this human had lost his ability to hear sound, yet he had continued to create music anyway. Kethvala played a small part of it. The sounds were strange and wild and sad and beautiful all at once. She did not understand how a being who could not hear had made something so full of feeling. She sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she began writing her report to the Galactic Collective Council. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had to choose her words carefully. She had to make them understand what she had found. A new sentient species has been discovered, she wrote. Classification pending. Threat level unknown. The species calls itself human. They have possessed radio technology for approximately 130 local years. In this time, they have advanced faster than any recorded species in collective history. She paused. She did not know how to explain the rest. How could she tell the council that these creatures had built nuclear weapons and symphony orchestras at the same time? How could she describe beings who painted pictures of angels while building bombs? She added one more line. Recommend immediate elevation to priority 1 observation. This species requires further study. They do not match any known patterns. She sent the message and leaned back in her chair. Outside her window, the yellow star burned quietly. The blue planet turned slowly in space, covered in clouds and water and life. The humans down there had no idea they were being watched. They were still looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone else was out there. Kethvala wondered what would happen when they finally found out. Her communication panel lit up. The council had received her message. For the first time in 4,000 years, they were calling an emergency meeting. The last time this had happened, it was because of a galaxy-wide plague. Now it was because of a small blue planet and the impossible creatures living on it. Kethvala looked at the data one more time. The humans were still broadcasting, still talking, singing, fighting, creating. They did not rest. They did not slow down. They reached for everything all the time with both hands. She realized something that made her scales turn cold. The collective had spent 50,000 years spreading slowly across the galaxy. They were careful. They were patient. They planned everything. These humans had been a technological species for barely a century, and they were already reaching for the stars. It was not a question of whether they would join the galactic community. It was a question of whether the galaxy was ready for them. The Great Library of Vatha was the largest collection of knowledge in the galaxy. It floated in space around a dying star, protected by shields that would last for millions of years. Inside its countless halls, every piece of information gathered by the collective for 50,000 years was stored and studied. Lead archivist Sun had worked in the library for longer than most species had existed. He was made of living crystal, a being whose body grew slowly over centuries, adding new layers with each passing age. He glowed with a soft inner light, and when he thought deeply, that light pulsed like a heartbeat. He had studied over 900 civilizations. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched empires grow from single planets to span entire star systems. Nothing surprised him anymore. He approached the new assignment with the same calm patience he brought to everything. Earth, he said to his team of researchers, a young species. Let us begin. The team gathered in a large chamber filled with floating screens. They were a mixed group, Marath with their color-changing scales, Kreth, who were not single beings, but collections of smaller creatures thinking together as one mind. Villani, tall and thin with large dark eyes. All of them were experts in understanding alien cultures. They began with the basics: history, geography, biology. The humans were soft creatures, fragile compared to most species. They lived short lives, rarely more than 100 years. They needed constant food, water, and air. They were not strong or fast or tough. Unremarkable, one of the Villani noted. I do not understand why the council is concerned. Sun said nothing. He had learned to wait before making judgments. They moved on to human history. The team worked in shifts, reviewing thousands of years of records. As the days passed, something strange happened. The researchers stopped taking breaks. They stopped talking to each other. They just sat at their screens, reading and watching. Sun noticed that the Kreth researcher had stopped moving entirely. The tiny creatures that made up its body were all focused on a single screen, watching something over and over again. What is that? Sun asked. War, the Kreth said. They call this one World War II. 60 million of them died. 60 million. And then they rebuilt everything. They created new nations, new laws, new art. They did not stop. They just kept going. Sun looked at the screen. He saw images of destruction, cities burning, people suffering. Then he saw images of rebuilding, of hope, of humans helping each other stand again. Fascinating, he said quietly. But it was the cultural archives that truly changed things. A young Morath researcher came to Soon one morning. Her scales were pale, and she had not slept. "Archivist," she said, "you need to see this." She showed him something the humans called music, not the mathematical harmonics that most species developed, where sounds followed logical patterns and created pleasing arrangements. This was different. This was wild and unpredictable. It made no logical sense, yet somehow it created feelings, strong feelings. Sun listened to a piece called Clair de Lune. It was just sounds made by pressing keys on a wooden box with strings inside. But as he listened, something happened that had not happened in centuries. His crystal body resonated. He felt something he could not name. "There is more," the researcher said. She showed him paintings, not just images of things, but expressions of emotion given visual form. A painting of a starry night that somehow captured loneliness and wonder at the same time. A painting of a woman smiling that had caused debates for centuries because nobody could agree on what her smile meant. She showed him literature, stories of love and loss and hope and despair. Tales of heroes who failed and villains who were forgiven. Books about the meaning of life that ask questions instead of giving answers. She showed him the file on Beethoven, the deaf composer. Soon read the entry 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. A human who could not hear had created some of the most complex and beautiful music in their history. He had done it by feeling the vibrations through the floor. Soon played the Ninth Symphony. He listened to the final movement, where human voices joined together in a song about joy and brotherhood. The words spoke of a future where all beings would be united in peace. A deaf man had imagined that. A man who could not hear music had dreamed of a universe filled with harmony. Sun stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He spent all his time in the archives, learning more about these impossible creatures. His light grew dim, and his colleagues worried about him. But he could not stop. He learned that humans created art during wars and plagues and disasters. They wrote poetry in prison cells. They painted pictures in concentration camps. They sang songs while starving. It was as if creation was not something they chose to do, but something they could not stop doing, even when everything was trying to destroy them. He learned that they had come close to destroying themselves many times. They had built weapons that could end all life on their planet. They had pointed those weapons at each other, and somehow they had not used them. Somehow they had pulled back from the edge every time. He learned that they disagreed about everything. They fought about politics, religion, resources, and ideas, but they also cooperated in ways that made no sense. Enemies would help each other after natural disasters. Soldiers would stop fighting to celebrate holidays together. They hated and loved each other with equal intensity. After many days, Soon called his team together. They looked exhausted. They looked changed. "What are they?" the Kreth asked. "They do not fit any pattern. They are violent and peaceful. They are cruel and kind. They destroy and create. What kind of species is this?" Sun thought for a long time. His light pulsed slowly as he considered his answer. "I have studied 900 civilizations," he finally said. "I have seen species that were pure and logical. I have seen species that were chaotic and emotional. I have never seen a species that was both at the same time. Until now." He turned to the screen showing Earth. The blue planet hung in space, small and fragile. "They are impossible," he said, "and yet they exist. I must speak with the Council. They need to understand what we are dealing with." He submitted his report. It was only 3 words long, but it said everything. "They are impossible." The Council read it and called for immediate deliberations. The galaxy was about to change, and nobody knew if they were ready. The Chamber of Voices was the largest meeting hall in the known galaxy. It floated at the exact center of collective space, a massive sphere where representatives from 847 species came together to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. Today, every seat was filled. Beings of all shapes and sizes sat in their designated areas. Some breathed oxygen, some breathed methane, some did not breathe at all. They had come from every corner of the galaxy because of a small blue planet and the creatures living on it. High Chancellor Morthax stood at the center of the chamber. He was a Delrathi, a species known for their calm wisdom and long lives. His gray skin was wrinkled with age, and his 3 eyes looked tired. He had led the council for 200 years, and he had never seen a debate like this one. "We are here to discuss the human question," he announced. His voice was carried to every corner of the chamber by invisible speakers. "The floor is open." Immediately, dozens of representatives tried to speak at once. The chamber erupted in noise. Morthax raised his hand for silence. "One at a time, he said. "We will hear from the preservationist faction first." A tall being with hard shell covering its body rose to speak. This was Commander Vex of the Tyranny, a military species that had protected the collective's borders for thousands of years. "These humans are dangerous," Vex said. His voice was sharp and certain. "Look at their history, constant warfare, weapons of mass destruction. They fight among themselves without end. What will happen when they have starships? They will bring their wars to us. We must act now, while they are still trapped on their single world." A murmur of agreement rose from part of the chamber. "What do you suggest?" Morthax asked. "Quarantine," Vex said. "We surround their system with monitoring stations. We prevent any ship from entering or leaving. We wait until they destroy themselves, as violent species always do. If they do not destroy themselves, we make sure they never leave their solar system." Another voice called out. This was Lena, a representative of the Ethan, a species known for their openness and optimism. She was small and delicate, with wings like colored glass. "You speak of imprisonment," she said. "You want to trap an entire species because you are afraid of what they might do. This is not justice. This is fear." Vex turned to face her. "Fear? Yes, I am afraid. I have read the reports. I have seen what they did to each other in their world wars. Millions dead, cities destroyed, and that was before they built their most terrible weapons. Now they have bombs that can poison land for generations. They are monsters." "They are also artists," Lena replied. "They are poets and dreamers and builders. I have listened to their music. I have read their stories. There is great beauty in them, as well as darkness. Beauty does not matter if they destroy everything." The debate continued for hours. Speaker after speaker rose to give their opinion. The chamber divided into clear groups. The preservationists wanted to contain humanity. They pointed to the endless wars, the nuclear weapons, the environmental destruction. They showed videos of human atrocities and asked how the collective could risk letting such beings into the galaxy. The integrationists wanted to reach out. They pointed to human creativity, adaptability, and courage. They showed videos of humans helping each other, sacrificing themselves for strangers, building incredible things against impossible odds. They argued that humanity could be a powerful ally if given the chance. The observers wanted to wait. They said there was not enough information. They said humanity was still young and might change. They advised patience and careful study before making any decision. Near the end of the debate, a junior delegate asked to speak. She was young and nervous, from a species that rarely addressed the full council, but her questions silenced the entire chamber. "What happens when they find us?" Morthax looked at her. "Explain." "We keep talking about what we will do to them," she said. "Contain them, contact them, watch them. But what happens when they come to us? They have been a technological species for barely a century, and they have already sent machines beyond their solar system. Their rate of advancement is faster than anything in our records. What happens when they build ships that can cross the stars?" She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species watching her. "Every species here achieved spaceflight after thousands of years of peaceful development. We took our time. We were careful. We planned. But the humans are not like us. They are building warships and dreaming of conquest while still fighting each other on their own planet. When they break free from their solar system, they will not come as supplicants asking to join us. They will come as equals. Maybe as conquerors." The chamber was completely silent. "We are not deciding what to do with them," she continued. "We are deciding what to do with ourselves. How do we prepare for something that has never existed before?" Morthax nodded slowly. "You raise a good point. Let us vote." The vote was the closest in recorded history. Thousands of years of precedent was nearly overturned. In the end, the observers won by the smallest possible margin. The decision was made. The collective would watch and wait. Monitoring stations would be built. Contact protocols would be drafted. Military preparations would begin quietly just in case. In the observation gallery above the chamber, old Suan watched the proceedings. He had come to share what he had learned in the archives, but he had stayed silent throughout the debate. He understood both sides. He had seen the darkness in human history. He had also seen the light. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, he whispered to himself, "They will surprise us all." He did not know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but he knew, with complete certainty, that the galaxy would never be the same. The humans were coming, sooner or later. And when they arrived, everything would change. The only question was what kind of change it would be. 50 years passed. The observation station orbiting Neptune was small and hidden. Its shields made it invisible to human sensors. Its crew watched Earth and waited for the disaster that everyone had predicted. The disaster never came. Station Commander Yeth looked out the window at the distant blue dot that was Earth. She was a Morith, like Kethvala, who had first discovered the humans. In fact, she had taken this position because of Kethvala. The old navigator had become famous throughout the collective, and young Morith dreamed of following in her footsteps. "Another transmission coming in," her communications officer reported. Yeth nodded. Transmissions from Earth never stopped. The humans were always broadcasting something. News, entertainment, scientific data, personal messages. They filled the void with their voices day and night. "What is it this time?" "A music concert. Something called a symphony orchestra. 10,000 humans gathered to listen." Yeth smiled. She had grown to love human music over her years on the station. It was so different from anything else in the galaxy. So emotional, so alive. The station had become the most requested assignment in the collective. Beings who once saw it as exile now competed for positions. The humans were fascinating. Everyone wanted to understand them better. Human culture had spread throughout collective space. Alien artists tried to paint like the human masters. Philosophers debated human concepts like love and hope. A famous Morith poet had written an epic based on a human story called the Odyssey. It had become one of the most celebrated works in the galaxy, and the humans kept surprising everyone. They had not destroyed themselves. Against all predictions, they had started healing their planet. Their air was cleaner. Their forests were growing back. They had found ways to make energy without poison. They had built permanent settlements on their moon. They called them lunar colonies and filled them with scientists and families. Children were being born in space, the first humans to never stand on Earth. They had sent people to the red planet they called Mars. They were building cities there, underground and on the surface. They were making the dead world come alive. Their probes had reached the edge of their solar system, little machines carrying messages and music and images, sent out into the darkness with hope that someone would find them. And they had started listening, really listening. Huge dishes pointed at the stars, searching for signals, waiting for proof that they were not alone. Yet thought about all of this as she watched the blue dot. The humans had done everything wrong according to collective wisdom. They had rushed. They had fought. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times. And yet here they were, reaching for the stars faster than any species before them. Her thoughts were interrupted by an alarm. "Commander, we have a problem. One of our patrol ships has lost power near Jupiter." Yeth felt her scales turn pale. "What happened?" "Catastrophic drive failure. The ship is dead in space." Standard protocol was clear. A collective vessel could not be discovered by a pre-contact species. The ship should self-destruct immediately. It was the law. "Tell them to activate self-destruct." "I did." "The commander is hesitating." Yeth understood. Self-destruct meant death for the entire crew. 23 beings would die to protect the secret of alien life. It was a heavy choice. "Tell them they have no option. They must—" The explosion lit up her sensors. The patrol ship had finally followed orders. 23 lives ended in a flash of light near Jupiter. But something else happened too. Something they had not expected. Human telescopes saw the flash. Observatories all over Earth recorded it. Within hours, Humans were talking about the strange explosion in space. Yeth watched the human response with growing amazement. Their governments were always fighting. They argued about everything. But when they saw that flash of light, something changed. Within days, they stopped arguing. They formed a joint mission. Countries that had been enemies for generations worked together to build a probe. They launched it toward Jupiter, fast, incredibly fast. The humans had been developing new engines, and this was the fastest ship they had ever built. Yeth reported everything to the council. They told her to maintain observation. Do not interfere. Do not make contact. Wait and see. The human probe reached the debris field after several weeks. Yeth watched through hidden cameras as the little machine searched through the wreckage of the collective ship. It found pieces of metal that did not exist on Earth. It found circuits that used technology humans had not yet invented. It found a single data core, damaged but intact. The probe sent everything back to Earth. Yeth saw the moment when human scientists opened the data. She watched their faces change from confusion to shock to wonder. She heard their voices tremble as they realized what they had found. One scientist, a woman with gray hair and glasses, spoke into a recorder. Her hands were shaking, her voice cracked with emotion. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Science Officer of the Jupiter Recovery Mission. We have analyzed the debris collected at coordinates." She stopped. She took a deep breath. "The materials and technology recovered are not of human origin. I repeat, they are not of human origin." She paused again. When she spoke next, her voice was barely a whisper. "We are not alone." Yeth watched as the message spread across Earth. She saw humans crying with joy, with fear, with confusion. She saw them looking up at the stars with new eyes. They knew now. They knew someone was out there, and they were already planning to find them. The silent watch was over. Everything was about to change. Yeth sent an urgent message to the council. "They know. They are coming." The galaxy held its breath. Earth erupted. The news of alien life spread like fire. Every screen, every speaker, every device carried the same message. We are not alone. The universe has other voices, other minds, other hearts. Some humans celebrated. They danced in the streets and cried with joy. Their oldest dream had come true. The stars were not empty. Some humans panicked. They built shelters and stockpiled supplies. They feared invasion, conquest, the end of everything they knew. Religious leaders struggled to explain what this meant for their faiths. Politicians argued about what to do. Scientists worked day and night to understand the alien technology they had found. But something remarkable happened. Something the collective had never seen before. The humans stopped fighting each other. Not completely, not everywhere, but enough to matter. Countries that had been enemies for centuries began talking. Old hatreds were set aside. Borders became less important. The human race looked at the stars and realized that their differences were small compared to what lay ahead. They built a transmitter, the largest one ever made. It drew power from fusion reactors and pointed at the sky with a message that contained everything: mathematics, music, art, history, language, science, joy, pain, war, peace, love, hate, everything humans had ever been and ever hoped to be. They broadcast it all. They hid nothing. The message ended with simple words: "This is humanity. This is who we are. We are coming to meet you." The collective council watched the broadcast in stunned silence. They had never seen a species introduce itself with such complete honesty. Most species tried to show only their best qualities. The humans showed everything, including their worst. The council debated again. Should they respond? Should they run? Should they prepare for war? Before they could decide, their sensors detected something impossible. A ship, a human ship, approaching the Neptune observation station. "That cannot be right," Commander Yeth said, staring at her screens. They found the alien drive in the debris. They could not have built a working version so quickly. Our scientists said it would take them at least 50 years to understand the basic principles. The ship came closer. It was rough and practical, built with human hands in human shipyards. But it worked. It crossed the distance between Earth and Neptune in days instead of months. The humans had done it again. They had done the impossible. The council held an emergency meeting. Some demanded that the station be abandoned before the humans arrived. Others wanted to fire on the approaching ship. The debate was fierce and frightened. Then a voice spoke up, a voice that had been silent for 50 years. Old Kethvala, the navigator who had first discovered Earth, stood before the council. She was elderly now, her scales faded with age, but her eyes were clear and bright. "I found them," she said. "Let me meet them." The council agreed. There was no better choice. Kethvala traveled to a neutral ship positioned between the station and the approaching human vessel. She waited there, alone, as the humans came closer. The human ship docked. The airlock opened. Kethvala saw her first living human. They were smaller than she expected, fragile-looking, soft skin, no claws, no scales, no shell. They stood on two legs and looked at her with eyes that were both afraid and curious. Their leader stepped forward. She was a woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Kethvala recognized her from the recordings. Dr. Elena Vasquez. The scientist who had first confirmed the alien debris. Elena looked at Kethvala for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Thank you," she said. Kethvala was confused. "Thank me? For what?" "For watching over us. For waiting. For giving us time to grow." Kethvala did not know how to respond. "You knew we were observing you?" Elena shook her head. "No, but we hoped. We have been telling stories about beings like you for centuries. We imagined you as gods and monsters and teachers and friends. But mostly we just hoped that someone was out there, that the universe was not empty, that if we kept reaching, someone would eventually reach back." She stepped closer to Kethvala. Behind her, the other humans watched with wide eyes. "We know what we are," Elena said. "We know we are loud and violent and chaotic. We know our history is full of horror. We know we scare you. But we have also spent our entire existence looking up at the stars and wondering, hoping, dreaming." She extended her hand. It was a human gesture of peace. Kethvala had studied it for decades but had never experienced it. "Let us show you what that means," Elena said. "Let us be your friends. Let us learn from you. Let us share what we have learned. We have so much to give and so much to receive." Kethvala looked at the small hand. She thought about everything she knew about humans, their wars, their weapons, their cruelty. She also thought about their music, their art, their stories, their hope. She thought about a deaf man who had written beautiful music because he refused to stop reaching for something he could never hear. Slowly, carefully, she extended one of her four arms and took Elena's hand. The moment was broadcast across the galaxy. 847 species watched a human and a Morath touch for the first time. The galaxy did not fall silent in fear. It fell silent in wonder. Later, much later, Old Soon sat in the great library of Vatha. He had watched the first contact on his screens. He had seen the handshake. He had heard Elena's words about hope and reaching. He played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony one more time. The voices sang about joy and brotherhood, about a future where all beings would be united. And finally he understood. Humans did not create despite their limitations. They created because of them. They were weak, so they built tools. They were mortal, so they told stories that would outlast them. They were alone in their solar system, so they dreamed of friends among the stars. They had always been reaching, reaching for sound, for light, for connection, for something beyond themselves. And now at last, something had reached back. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans were here. They brought their chaos and their creativity, their violence and their love, their fear and their hope. They brought everything they were, and the universe was brighter for it.